So yeah, I pepper sprayed the HOA president, right in the face. He had broken onto my ranch, crossed the fence, clear as day marked private property, and started snooping around my barn with a flashlight. I didn't ask questions. I'd warned them before, especially the guy in charge, Brandon Keller, president of the Willow Creek HOA. I told them, stay off my land. I don't have a gate connecting to their neighborhood. No legal ties, no shared property lines, nothing. Just my ranch and the open country. But Brandon? He's the type who thinks a little power means he can do whatever the hell he wants. I just stepped outside with my dog, Duke, when I spotted the beam of light slicing through the side of my barn. My heart just about jumped out of my chest. Last time someone crept around here, they poisoned 2 of my goats and vanished. I wasn't about to let that happen again. So I grabbed my flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other, and started making my way down the path through the tall grass. Duke was right beside me, growling low, ears up and alert. The light inside the barn moved again. I yelled, "Who's out there?" No answer. I didn't wait. I ran up and kicked the barn door open, and there he was. Brandon Keller. Wearing a damn polo shirt with his HOA badge clipped on like that gave him some kind of authority over my land. "What the hell are you doing in my barn?" I shouted. He turned, calm as you please, and said, "This is HOA business. We've had some complaints of..." I didn't let him finish. I hit him with the pepper spray. Right in the face. He screamed, dropped his flashlight, started clawing at his eyes and coughing like crazy. And then he shouted something I won't ever forget. "You're gonna regret this. The board's on my side." I stood over him, breathing hard, watching him roll around in the dirt, blinded and wheezing. And right then, red and blue lights lit up the end of the gravel road. Someone had called the cops. But who? Now hang on, I should back up a bit. This whole thing didn't start with pepper spray. It started with something a whole lot simpler. A dream, this ranch, and the hope that folks would just respect my land. I bought the place after my dad passed. Left my job in Dallas, packed up what I had, and came back to the old property out in East Texas. It wasn't fancy, about 50 acres of rough land, an old 2-bedroom farmhouse, a weathered barn, and fields that hadn't been touched in years. But it was peaceful. It was mine. I'm Jake Monroe, 34 years old. I worked in IT for nearly a decade, but city life was slowly draining me. I wanted something real, something I could build with my hands. The first 6 months were tough. I spent my mornings fixing fences and my evenings just trying to get a strong enough internet signal to check the dang weather. I didn't have much, just Duke, my beat-up old truck, and a whole lot of grit. Then came the HOA. I didn't even know we were neighbors at first. Willow Creek Estates was one of those upscale gated communities that popped up about a quarter mile from my back fence. Big gates. Bigger egos. Rules for everything. How short your grass had to be, what kind of mailbox you could have, even how long you could leave your trash cans out. I wasn't part of their little club. Not legally. Not even close. My land wasn't zoned under their control, and I came in from the county road, not their private entrance. But the issues started small. At first, it was just notes left under my gate. Your fencing is unsightly and disrupts the neighborhood's visual appeal. Your chickens are causing excessive noise. Your tractor is visible from the street and qualifies as an eyesore. The first I left, I figured it was just some nosy neighbor with too much time on their hands. Then I met Brandon Keller. He showed up one sunny morning, all clean-cut in khakis, a tucked-in blue shirt, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Monroe," he said, all smiles, "I'm Brandon Keller, president of the Willow Creek HOA. We've been getting some complaints from our residents." I raised an eyebrow. "About what exactly?" "Well," he started, flipping through his clipboard, "your barn roof's pretty rusty, your rooster starts crowing too early, and we think your pond runoff might be spilling over into HOA property." I just stared at him. "You do realize I'm not part of your HOA, right?" He gave me this tight little smile and said, "Well, not officially, but your land does border ours. And around here, we try to keep a certain standard, for the good of the whole community." I told him to leave, politely at first, but he didn't. About a week later, I found an HOA notice nailed to my fence. Violation, unkempt exterior. Failure to comply may result in penalties. I called up the sheriff. Sheriff Matthews came out, saw the notice, and just laughed. Jake, don't let him rattle you. You're not part of their outfit. They've got no authority over your land. I trusted him. I figured that'd be the end of it. But Brandon wasn't finished. More notices kept coming. Then he mailed me a final warning, threatening daily fines unless I took my barn down. I ignored every bit of it. Then one morning, I caught a drone buzzing above my pasture while I was feeding the goats. I grabbed my slingshot and knocked it clean out of the sky. Next day, guess who shows up at my gate again? Brandon. You destroyed HOA surveillance property, he shouted. I told him, plain as day, get off my land or I'm calling the sheriff again. And I did. But Brandon didn't quit. He waited. He watched. He planned. Which leads us back to that night in the barn. That's how it all came to a head. And now, with red and blue lights bouncing off the trees and creeping down my gravel road, I had this sudden thought. Had he set me up? Was Brandon filming me? Was this all some sick trap cooked up by the HOA? Duke started barking as the patrol car rolled closer. I stood there frozen, gravel crunching under my boots, while Brandon kept moaning in pain behind me. The cruiser came to a stop, and 2 officers stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. Hands where we can see 'em, one of them shouted. I lifted my hands. This is my property. I called out. That man broke into my barn. One of the officers headed straight for Brandon, who was squinting through swollen eyelids, barely able to speak. He attacked me, Brandon groaned. I was conducting an investigation. The other officer turned to me. What kind of investigation are we talking about? That's when I saw it, tucked in Brandon's pocket. Wasn't just an ID badge. He had a camcorder. He'd been filming everything. And suddenly, it hit me. Just before I sprayed him, I'd heard a faint beep. A recording beep. I couldn't shake the feeling. He wanted this to happen. For what? What was Brandon trying to do out here that night? And how the hell did the cops show up before I even made a call? Just when I thought this couldn't get any worse, one of the officers flipped open the camcorder and started watching. Then he looked up at me, eyebrow raised. Sir, you're gonna want to see this. He turned the screen toward me. His face was unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. I stepped forward, still catching my breath. Duke circled around, tense and growling low at Brandon, who was still groaning in the dirt. The footage started to play. At first, it was just Brandon walking up my driveway. The beam from his flashlight bounced around as he made his way to the barn. Then the audio kicked in. Tonight, I'm gonna catch him violating HOA visual standards and finally get proof this guy's running an illegal farm. My jaw tightened. The 2 officers exchanged a look. The recording kept going. Brandon crept up to the barn, shoved the door open with his foot, and whispered into the camcorder. Let's see what kind of filth this hillbilly's hiding in here. That was before I even walked in. Before I pepper sprayed him. The officers paused the footage. One of the officers looked up from the footage and said, "Looks like he entered your property with clear intent." Then he added, "And it doesn't sound like he had any real legal reason to be there." "I've been trying to tell folks for weeks," I said. "The HOA's been harassing me, even though I'm not part of their community." "And Brandon? He's been the ringleader. I've reported it, I've warned him, and now this." The first officer nodded and walked back toward his cruiser to call in medical help for Brandon. The second stayed with me and helped fill out a full statement. By then, it was pretty obvious, I wasn't the one who started this. But that didn't mean Brandon was done. Even while they loaded him onto a stretcher, eyes swollen, still coughing, he kept muttering through gritted teeth, "This isn't over. You'll regret this, Mitchell. I'll take your land." I stood on the porch and watched as the ambulance drove off, its red lights fading into the dark. Once the adrenaline wore off, my legs gave out and I dropped onto the porch swing. My hand trembled as I scratched behind Duke's ears. What had just happened? Was this the end of it, or just the beginning? The next morning, I barely had time to drink my coffee before trouble showed up again, this time, wearing heels. I was fixing the barn door when this sleek black SUV pulled up. Tinted windows, spotless paint job. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked straight off a courtroom drama set, sharp sunglasses, expensive blazer, walking like she owned the place. "Mr. Mitchell?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I'm Kimberly Rhodes. I represent the Whispering Pines HO. You assaulted our president, Mr. Brandon Carter. We're preparing to press charges and file a civil suit for damages." I blinked. "Did the police not show you the footage? The one from his own camcorder?" "We're aware of the video," she said, cool as ice. "But trespassing laws can be flexible in communities with shared boundaries." I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Shared boundaries? Lady, my ranch is private. I've got the deed, and the sheriff's been out here 3 times backing that up." She pulled a paper from her briefcase and held it out. "Then maybe you'll want to take a look at this." According to her, the HOA board voted last year to annex my outer fields into something they called the Whispering Pines Visual Perimeter Zone. Her words, not mine. Any land within visual range of HOA property, she said, was now subject to their aesthetic review. My jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Oh, but we already passed it," she said, smooth as a snake. "It's in the updated bylaws. Effective since last November." "This is nuts," I said. "You'll be receiving an official packet in the mail," she added. "Expect fines and violations to begin Monday." Then, just like that, she turned around, climbed back into her SUV, and drove off like she hadn't just dropped a legal nuke on my life. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding. And suddenly, it hit me, this wasn't about my rusty barn. Wasn't about a crowing rooster. And it sure as hell wasn't about Brandon's bruised pride. They wanted my land. Whispering Pines had run out of space. Their lots were all full. But folks with deep pockets were lined up, ready to build more homes. Only problem? No land left to build on. Except mine. They didn't want me gone because I was an eyesore. They wanted me gone because my ranch was the last patch of open green for miles, and they needed it. And now they were coming for it. I called up Sheriff Matthews again. He came out later that afternoon and looked over the document Kimberly had left behind. "They've pulled tricks like this before," he said, shaking his head. "Tried to annex a public fishing dock 3 years ago. Took it to court and lost. But it cost the poor guy 20 grand just to fight it." "Well, I don't have 20 grand lying around," I said. "Then we better find a way to stop this before it goes that far." That same afternoon, I got to work. I dug through every old map, zoning record, land deed, and tax document I could get my hands on. Turned out, my ranch had been officially zoned as private agricultural land for over 50 years. The HOA had zero authority here. No legal power at all. But they had money. They had attorneys. And I wasn't gonna win this thing in court, not on my own. So I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't talked to my cousin Luke in years. He used to be a contractor, but these days he was knee-deep in veterans' rights work, a real fighter, with a sharp mind, calloused hands, and a long memory for every time our family got pushed around. He picked up on the second ring. "Danny? You good?" "I need help," I said. "It's the HO. They broke into my ranch. I hit the president with pepper spray." There was a pause. Then he just said, "I'm on my way." 3 days later, Luke showed up in his old pickup, toolbox in the back, a stack of legal books riding shotgun. He wasn't just here to lend a hand. He came to push back. First thing we did? Signs, big ones. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Then we got to work reinforcing the fences. We installed solar-powered security cameras all around the ranch, rigged up a motion-triggered floodlight system that lit the barnyard up like Friday night football. I mean, the place glowed when anything moved. Then, as we sat on the porch sipping coffee, Luke leaned back and said something that caught me off guard. "You know what really makes people like this squirm?" I glanced at him. "What? Lawyers?" "Nope. Publicity." I raised an eyebrow. The news?" He shook his head. "No, man, online. You've got video. You've got a story. HOA bullying's a hot button. People hate this kind of thing. Post it. Let the internet do what it does." It felt a little wild, but I did it. That night, I uploaded a trimmed-down version of the footage, just the essentials. Titled it, "HOA President Breaks Into My Ranch, Gets Pepper Sprayed, and Says It's Legal." By sunrise? 300,000 views. By lunch? Front page of Reddit. By dinner? My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. And that's when the knock came. It wasn't Brandon. Wasn't Kimberly. Wasn't even the sheriff. It was someone I didn't know. Guy in a black suit. No name tag. No smile. Just a blank face and a manila envelope. He handed it to me and said one sentence. "You've made some powerful enemies, Mr. Mitchell." Then he turned and walked off without another word. I stood there in the doorway, heart in my throat, staring at the envelope in my hand. I opened it. The first line read, "Notice of eminent domain review. Property under consideration for community redevelopment." I dropped into my chair like the wind had been knocked out of me. They were actually going to try to take my land. This wasn't just HA nonsense anymore. This was war. That paper felt heavier than any post-hole digger I'd ever held. It wasn't just some legal form, it was a direct threat to my whole life. To the land I'd spent years working, loving, bleeding on. Eminent domain. Community redevelopment. Those were the kind of words folks in suits used to steal your home and slap the progress label on it. I read the notice again, this time out loud. The Whispering Pines Development Association, in conjunction with regional zoning committees, is currently reviewing nearby parcels of land for potential acquisition under community enhancement initiatives. What a load of bureaucratic garbage. Translation? We want your land, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Called Luke. He was out fixing the east fence when he picked up. Came jogging in, sleeves rolled up, sweat dripping off his forehead. When he saw the paper, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "They're pushing this real hard," he muttered. "They're looping in government offices now. Trying to make it look clean. Like they're doing the town a favor." I nodded slowly. "They want me to look like the problem." "Exactly," he said. "The guy feeding goats and patching up fence posts. Somehow you're the villain." Meanwhile, they're putting up prefab houses and calling it community growth. He shook his head, walked inside, and opened his laptop. "Not on my watch," he said. That night, we went live with a full update. I told everything. How Brandon broke in, the footage from his camcorder, the pepper spray, the suit from Kimberly, and now this latest stunt with the eminent domain notice. Luke pulled up the property laws and zoning maps, laying it all out right there on the live stream. The proof was undeniable. My land had never, not once, fallen under HOA jurisdiction. The internet went wild. Comments came pouring in faster than we could read them. Stuff like, "HOAs are out of control. This guy needs a good lawyer and a GoFundMe. You can't just take a man's land, 'cause it looks nice from the road." By the next morning, it looked like a media circus outside the ranch. News vans from every local station parked along the road. Bloggers, podcasters, even some documentary crew from Austin that specializes in land rights showed up. A reporter from Channel 6 News asked me straight up, "Mr. Mitchell, do you feel safe?" And I paused, 'cause truthfully no. Not really. Yeah, I had cameras. I had fences. Pepper spray. A dog who'd die for me. But I was still just one guy, standing alone against a system that didn't give a damn about laws or right and wrong. They cared about control. But oddly enough, the next big moment didn't come from a lawyer or a sheriff. It came from someone I never would have expected. A lady named Susan Jenkins. Mid-60s, soft-spoken, with curly gray hair and a kind face. She pulled up in this powder blue sedan, stepped out holding a dish covered in foil. I didn't trust it, at first. "I know I'm with Whispering Pines," she said, her voice nervous. "But I want you to know, not all of us over there support what Todd's been doing." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. He never even put the land annexation up for a vote. Just slipped it into the newsletter like it was already done. Now, with that video out, he's saying you faked it. That you edited it. "I've got the raw footage," I told her, still eyeing the dish in her hands. She handed it over with a soft smile. "Peach cobbler. Just know you've got neighbors who believe you. Good luck." Then she got back in her car and drove off. That small act? That simple pan of cobbler? Meant more than she probably knew. It reminded me there were still decent folks on both sides of the fence. But good feelings don't last long when you're standing nose to nose with a cornered snake. That night, I was jolted awake by the sound of an engine, and then a loud pop, followed by another. I grabbed the flashlight, whistled for Max, and ran out toward the front fence. And there it was. My mailbox? Gone. Completely destroyed. Twisted metal scattered like shrapnel across the gravel. One of the brand new security lights had been shot out too. Somebody had driven by and opened fire. They weren't just angry anymore, they were sending a message. I called Sheriff Owens again. He showed up fast, walked the scene, took photos, bagged shell casings. "We'll look into it," he said. But his voice? It was tired. Like the fight was stretching past what local law could handle. Luke stood beside me, arms crossed tight. "They're trying to scare him. Next it'll be tires slashed. Poisoned livestock." I swallowed hard. "They already tried that once." He nodded. "Then it's time we go beyond defense." That night, we turned the barn into a makeshift command post. Luke set up backup Wi-Fi, a separate emergency phone line, and got to work drafting a formal complaint to the Texas Attorney General. We were building a real defense now, loud, legal, and impossible to ignore. But Todd? Yeah, Todd wasn't letting up either. A week later, another letter showed up, fancy envelope, gold embossed seal, and a whole glossy packet inside. HOA cease and desist. They wanted me to take down everything. The videos, the posts, any mention of Whispering Pines or its officers, by name, by photo, all of it. And if I didn't? They were threatening a full-blown defamation lawsuit. It was laughable. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tucked in the back? A notice of entry. Apparently, they had scheduled a compliance inspection of my barn. Just like that. Luke read it 3 times, then cracked up. "They seriously think they can just walk in here again?" But I didn't laugh. Because I knew Todd. And I knew he wasn't bluffing. Out of nowhere, a white golf cart came rolling up from the old trail that runs near the woods behind the ranch. I hadn't touched that path in years. It was always overgrown and blocked by downed trees. But now, it was cleared, muddy, and covered in fresh tire tracks. They were treating it like their own private road. Sitting up front, clipboard in hand and wearing a smug little grin, was Todd Simmons. Still nursing that pepper spray wound, rocking a pair of sunglasses like he was on vacation. And he wasn't alone. 2 other HOA board members sat beside him, dressed like they were headed to a backyard barbecue, not someone else's property. I didn't waste a second. Grabbed my phone, hit record, and marched right toward them. "You're trespassing again, Todd," I shouted. "Get off my land." "We have legal authority," he barked back. "Your barn's being inspected for code violations." Just shook my head. "You're not code enforcement, man. You're a glorified neighborhood gossip group." Still, he kept walking, heading straight for my barn. That's when Max lunged forward, barking like a damn cannon. One of the board members jumped like he'd seen a ghost. But Todd? He didn't even flinch. He shoved the gate open, again. That was it. I reached for the pepper spray on my belt and raised it. "Last warning," I said, my voice low. He just smirked. I was about to let the spray fly when I heard a loud clunk, metal on metal, and Max let out a sharp yelp. I whipped around. One of the board guys had swung a stick and hit my dog. My dog! I shouted. I lost it. Tackled Todd straight into the mud. We crashed hard, his clipboard flying one way, his sunglasses the other. The other 2 scrambled back, shouting, panicking. I had Todd pinned down, my fist pulled back, but I didn't throw the punch. Not yet. Because there it was, right inside his open jacket, a copy of my property deed. Covered in red markings and highlights, notes scribbled all over it, showing where they thought my easement overlapped their precious HOA boundaries. He wasn't just trespassing. He was building a legal case. And that's when it hit me. If we didn't shut this down now, they were gonna win. But I had something Todd didn't. I had the truth. And I had one more ace up my sleeve, something Luke had just finished setting up inside the barn. Todd had no clue what was coming. He was still on the ground, coughing, caked in mud, trying to regain his breath. I stared down at him, my heart pounding. "You hit my dog," I growled, eyes locked on the guy with the stick, who was now backing away, pale and shaky. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "You broke onto my land again. Brought fake documents, fake code violations, and now you're hitting animals." Just then, Luke stepped out from the side of the barn, phone held up high, calmly recording everything. "Every second of this is going online," he said, dead serious. "So go ahead, gentlemen, smile for the internet." That's when Todd made his move. He twisted under me, grabbed a big handful of mud, and flung it right into my face. Blinded, I stumbled back, wiping my eyes. By the time I could see again, he was up and running, sprinting straight for the barn. "Don't let him in!" Luke yelled. I took off after him. Todd shoved the barn doors open and slipped inside, eyes scanning frantically until they landed on it, our newest surprise. Mounted up high, behind a tarp and a few feed bins, was a 72-inch flat-screen TV hooked up to a lockdown laptop and server system. Luke had finished installing it just 2 nights earlier, and it was doing exactly what we built it to do, capturing and storing round-the-clock surveillance from every corner of the ranch. Every drone flyover, every so-called inspection, every trespass, all streamed live and uploaded straight to a secure cloud server. There was Todd, standing dead still, watching himself from multiple angles, trespassing, breaking gates, violating every line of the law. He turned to me, his face drained of color. You've been recording all this?" Luke stepped inside, arms crossed, camera still rolling. "Every second," he said. His hands curled into fists. "You can't use any of this. I'll have it all thrown out. It's an invasion of privacy." Luke just laughed. "On your property? Nah, Kevin, you're the one breaking in. And now we're pressing charges for trespassing, assault, attempted fraud, and animal cruelty." "You're bluffing." "Then let's take it to court," I said, still brushing the last of the mud off my shirt. "Let's show the judge that little annotated copy of my deed. Let's show them your HOA buddies going after a dog. See what they think." Kevin's face twitched, he was starting to crack. But then he did something none of us saw coming. He pulled out his phone, dialed someone and said, "Get the car ready. Plan B goes into motion tonight." Then he hung up, shoved past Luke, and stormed out of the barn. "Should we stop him?" I asked. Luke shook his head. "Nope. We've got all the proof we need. Let him dig his own grave." Still, that whole Plan B thing stuck with me. I had no clue what Kevin was cooking up, but I knew it wasn't good. We stayed on high alert. Luke kept watch through the camera feeds, and I took patrol shifts with Max. You could feel the tension, heavy, like a storm about to hit. Even the goats were acting on edge. The next break in the chaos came from a place I didn't expect: support. Carol Jenkins showed up again. Only this time, she didn't just bring peach cobbler. She brought backup. 2 other Whispering Pines residents, Marcy and Craig, came with her. Both looked to be in their late 50s, with kind eyes and worn hands, the kind of folks who never really fit in with a neighborhood full of manicured lawns and $80,000 SUVs. "We heard what happened," Craig said, "and we've had enough." Carol handed me a folder. Inside was a letter, signed by 22 residents from Whispering Pines. It was a formal request for a vote of no confidence against Kevin Simmons as HOA president. "This is real?" I asked, still stunned. Craig nodded. "We've seen what he's doing. He lied to all of us. Spent thousands of our dues on legal teams. We're done with this garbage." My throat got tight. I just stood there for a second before I managed to say, "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." But even with folks rallying behind us, we had no idea what Kevin's Plan B actually looked like, until that night. I was in the kitchen feeding Max when Luke came bursting through the back door, panting like he'd run a mile. 3 black trucks, he said. No plates. They just pulled up near the north pasture. I dropped Max's bowl and ran out after him. Down the hill, under the moonlight, I saw them, 3 big pickup trucks parked in the grass. A group of people moved around them, fast and focused, flashlights darting across the fence line. I grabbed my rifle from the cabinet. Not to use, just to make it clear I wasn't some pushover. We moved in slow. What the hell are they doing? I muttered. And then I saw it. 2 guys were tearing down my fencing. One had bolt cutters, the other was rolling out a measuring wheel like he was surveying. And then Kevin stepped out of one of the trucks, wearing a reflective vest, carrying a giant rolled-up blueprint. He spread it across the hood of a truck and started pointing toward the fence. He was mapping out construction zones. Luke cursed under his breath. They're trying to break ground illegally, right now. Probably hoping to claim some kind of overnight occupancy loophole. I didn't wait. I flipped on every floodlight we had. The whole pasture lit up like high noon. Kevin and his crew froze. All eyes turned up the hill, to where I stood, rifle in one hand, phone in the other, already dialing the sheriff. "You're trespassing again, Kevin," I shouted through the megaphone Luke had built into the porch. He didn't respond. Instead, he lifted his arm. One of the men stepped forward and lit a fire, a controlled burn, small but intentional, right at the base of my eastern fence. "My haystack, my livelihood." Luke gasped. "They're trying to burn the place down and pin it on you." I didn't even stop to think. The phone hit the dirt as I sprinted toward the fire. Max was already ahead of me, barking like mad. Just as I reached for the hose, I heard heavy footsteps behind me, boots, lots of them, and then the loud crack of wood splintering. They were in the barn again. But this time, they weren't just snooping around, they were taking something. Smoke started to thicken as the fire caught onto the haystack. Flames were climbing fast. I yanked the hose off the wall, flipped the nozzle and blasted water toward the base of the fire. "Luke!" I shouted. "Cut the line to the south trough. We need more pressure." He was already moving, bolting toward the goat pen where we'd rigged the manual valves. Max kept barking, darting around the fire like he wanted to fight it himself. But even with flames rising, what scared me most was the noise coming from the barn. They'd busted in the reinforced lock Luke and I had just installed last week. I could hear them, boots stomping on concrete, and something heavy being dragged. Then came the screech of metal. They were stealing the server tower. The same one that stored everything: backup video, HOA incident logs, legal documents, everything we'd gathered since this whole nightmare began. "Josh!" Luke yelled from the other side of the fire. "They're trying to wipe the evidence." I dropped the hose, fire still half alive, and ran toward the barn, choking on smoke. Inside, I found 2 guys in black hoodies, hauling the server tower like it was a body. Wires trailed behind them, yanked from the wall like torn veins. At the door stood a 3rd guy, holding a metal pipe, clearly acting as lookout. He saw me, and I didn't wait. I ripped the pepper spray from my belt and sprayed him full in the face. He howled, dropping the pipe and clutching his eyes. The other 2 froze. One tripped over a mess of tangled cords. I charged straight at the guy holding the server, slamming my shoulder into his chest. He hit the floor with a loud thud, and the server clanged down beside him. Then Luke stormed in right behind me, holding a shovel like it was a baseball bat. "Back off," he shouted, "or I start swinging." The second guy hesitated for a second, but then turned and bolted, slipping out the back and vanishing into the dark. The one I'd sprayed was still trying to crawl blindly toward the door. Luke reached into his pocket, pulled out a pair of zip ties, something we'd stashed just in case, and tied the guy's wrists behind his back. The guy screamed and spat, "This is assault. You're gonna regret this." "Oh yeah," Luke growled. "Tell that to your HOA boss when the sheriff finds you trespassing and setting fire to hay bales." Outside, the fire had finally died down, just smoldering embers left, but the damage wasn't done yet. Kevin was gone. So were the other 2 trucks. They'd fled the scene. And worse, one of them had managed to grab the backup hard drive we used to mirror the server. Our safety net gone. The barn reeked of smoke, sweat, and burnt rubber. The server tower was busted up, but thankfully not completely destroyed. Still, I felt sick. All of this, just to push me off my own land. We called Sheriff Daniels again. This time, he didn't come alone. 3 cruisers rolled up with lights flashing red and blue across the fields. Deputies spread out, collecting evidence and searching the area. They arrested the guy we zip-tied. And after a little pressure, he cracked. Said Kevin paid him in cash, called it a reclamation job. I didn't know you'd be armed, he muttered. You broke into a man's barn, Sheriff Daniels said flatly, and set his property on fire. He snapped. What did you think was going to happen? They hauled him off in cuffs. I stood there in the early morning light, watching the sun rise over the field while embers still glowed at the base of the haystack. We'd lost about half the goat feed, and the barn door was toast, again. But I was still standing. And so was the ranch. The next day brought something I hadn't felt in weeks, quiet. After all the harassment, destruction, and non-stop chaos, Whispering Pines suddenly went still. No golf carts buzzing by, no drones hovering, no blacked-out SUVs lurking near the fence. It was like someone had called off the dogs. Or maybe, just maybe, they realized they'd gone too far. Even so, I didn't buy into the silence. That day, a few local news crews showed up. Word had gotten out about the break-in. They interviewed Luke, got footage of the scorched hay pile, and zoomed in on what was left of the barn door. One of the reporters turned to me and asked, "Do you think Kevin Simmons is finally gonna back off after all this?" I gave her a tired smile. "Kevin's used to people folding," I said. "He's not used to anyone standing their ground." And we did fight back. Turns out, the footage from that night, the fire, the break-in, it hadn't been lost after all. The server's secondary cache had saved most of it. Luke managed to recover more than 80% of the video. We pulled everything together, every threat, every trespass, every HOA stunt, and cut it into a full documentary-style video. We posted it online. The response was insane. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People from all over were watching. Then came the knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a neighbor, a trespasser, or some attorney. It was a federal agent. Guy had an FBI badge and a look that meant business. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I'm Agent Reyes. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Kevin Simmons and the Whispering Pines HOA." I blinked. "What?" "We're opening a federal investigation into property fraud, racketeering, and potential bribery involving several HOAs in this region. Your case might be tied to something much bigger." My stomach dropped. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends," Reyes said. "Do you want to press charges?" I didn't answer right away. My hand tightened at my side. All I could see was Kevin's smug face, that blueprint laid out across his truck hood, and Max, yelping after getting hit. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I want him held accountable. For everything." Reyes gave a firm nod. "Then you're gonna want to see this." He handed me a thick folder. Inside, photos, transaction logs, documents. One stood out right away, a shot of Kevin shaking hands with a county zoning officer. Caption read, "Zoning boundary change proposal approved, off record." He'd been bribing officials. This went way deeper than I thought. But the real gut punch was at the very bottom of that folder, a notarized document, filed by Kevin Simmons himself. An emergency eviction request. Filed just 3 days ago. He was going to try one more time. I stood on my porch, staring down at that eviction notice like it was a live grenade. Even after all this, after the fire, after breaking into my barn, after what he did to Max, he still had the audacity to go through with legal action. And this time, it wasn't through the HOA. He'd gone straight to county civil court, skipping all the HOA channels. The document cited bogus bylaws, forged annexation maps, and fake emergency ordinance violations. According to his claim, my ranch was now considered non-compliant agricultural land, a visual and safety hazard. To most of the residents, it was just lies, total fiction. But lies backed by money and a few forged signatures? Yeah, that can still get somebody kicked off their land. Luke flipped through the eviction papers, his jaw tight. "If we hadn't caught this in time," he muttered, "the court would have sent a deputy out here. You could have been out on the street in a matter of days." My stomach turned at the thought. And the kicker? We weren't even part of the HOA. Didn't matter. Kevin Simmons had influence, county officials in his back pocket. Agent Reyes had stuck around town after his first visit. With his help, We pulled together everything, the video footage, the fake deed notes, the barn's camera feed from the break-in, all of it. We sent it straight to the Federal Property Crimes Unit. Reyes looked over every piece, nodded once, real sharp, and said, "It's enough." And that was it. They moved. The day it all went down, I was cleaning out the goat pens when I heard sirens slicing through the quiet morning air. I walked up to the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans, just in time to see 3 unmarked SUVs roll into Whispering Pines. Kevin didn't go peacefully. Carol called me minutes later, her voice half laughing, half stunned. "He was yelling the whole time," she said. "Swore he'd sue everyone who turned against him. Tried to say he was the real victim. But this time, nobody was buying it." Kevin Simmons, president of Whispering Pines HOA, was arrested on multiple charges, 7 counts of trespassing, 2 for attempted arson, animal cruelty, fraud, unlawful surveillance, and conspiracy to forge land documents. By noon, his mugshot was everywhere. There he was, the guy who tormented me for months, getting cuffed right there in front of his marble-columned porch, escorted by the very sheriff he once tried to bribe. I thought that was the end of it. But then Agent Reyes showed up again that afternoon, holding a sealed file and wearing a grim look. "There's something else you need to see," he told me. Inside were transcripts of wiretaps, recorded conversations, names, dates. Turns out Kevin hadn't been acting alone. He'd been part of a quiet little alliance, HOA presidents from all over the county, scheming together. They had this thing they called visual compliance zones. Fake term. But it was enough to scare nearby landowners into selling or giving up. They were bribing inspectors, faking votes, and slowly pushing people out. I wasn't their first target, just the first one to fight back. And because I stood up, others started stepping forward too. Within a week, 2 more HOA presidents were in handcuffs. 4 county workers were under investigation. That zoning officer from the photo resigned immediately. Later that week, I stood on the porch again, watching the sun set over the fields. Max sat beside me, tail wagging slow and steady. The barn had a brand new door. The fences? Reinforced. The cameras now streamed to the cloud and backed up to a flash drive, locked inside a fireproof safe. Whispering Pines elected a new HOA president, Carol Jenkins. First thing she did? Scrap every forged bylaw that even mentioned my property. Then she came over in person, handed me a letter of apology, signed by over 24 residents. "We're sorry," she said, her voice real and honest. "And thank you for not backing down." The news coverage faded eventually. But the lesson? That stayed. I learned that peace isn't passive, it's something you might have to fight for. That being kind doesn't mean being weak. And just because you're standing alone, doesn't mean you're standing wrong. I also learned to never underestimate a stubborn rancher, his cousin who knows his way around a server, and a loyal dog who just wants to guard his home. Oh, and pepper spray? Still the best $12 I ever spent.